This is the Pyro, which is one of TF2's offense classes. A Pyro is known for many things, such as patrolling flanks, standing in front of a sentry, whether it's his teammate or an enemy's, airblasting enemies off cliffs, and other miscellaneous fire-related tactics. Now, if there's one thing to note, I did not really like Pyro very much. Just as the intro portrayed, you kind of just run around burning people, and then, I don't know, maybe occasionally press right-click and airblast a rocket into an enemy completely on accident. Like, oh, look, a Pyro, let me just blast him away before he hits me with an afterburn that does up to 80 damage. Alright, that's actually not that bad. That's cool and all, but how about I just hop on Badwater and use Scout instead and absolutely just demolish this lobby? Yo! What was that? Here's the thing. For those of you who have watched so far, you may have noticed one key word that I've said. That being the main point that I did dislike the Pyro. Of course, back then, I used to make the assumptions that were already mentioned, such as Pyro just being a hold W and M1 menace, and now I realize that I was a fool! The thing is, there is a way to make Pyro an actual contending power class that not only supports his team, but can really put up the numbers. There really is a way to make Pyro fun, and all that I had to do was this. Yup, now he's literally the best in the game. Those that actually play Pyro know that he has some pretty silly and unique unlocks. One of which that takes the cake for me though has got to be the flare gun. This weapon somewhat converts Pyro into functioning similar to a demo man, using two primary kind of weapons, with his flamethrower being a close range support tool, and the flare gun being the real damage dealer. The flare gun has 16 flare sort of bullets that do 30 damage on contact while also burning the enemy, but also has the very important gimmick of doing full crit damage anytime you hit a target who is already on fire, meaning that paired with the burn damage required to set an enemy on fire, you could almost essentially instant kill 4 out of the 9 classes in the game, and along with the afterburn damage, which adds on medics and even possibly demo man to that instant kill list. With the flare gun, Pyro no longer becomes a close range only class, and when an enemy sees a flare Pyro at range, they aren't thinking they're untouchable anymore, they're thinking, wait, if he hits me with another flare, I'm being sent back to the spawn room. Now, how does such a simple weapon change make the Pyro fun? Well, there are two very defining reasons for this, one of which being how the flare gun counters a lot of Pyro's typical shortcomings. Pyro usually is countered by classes who can tank his slow burn damage like a heavy, or those who can easily challenge him at range like an engineer and a sentry. The flare gun, though, takes on both of those aspects with ease. An enemy engineer has to be way more wary of you, since with the flare gun you can deal that 30 damage plus afterburn from any range, which can be a little out of hand, especially against a battle engineer or one who is positioning himself away from his dispensers, which is very common for those who like to use a particular weapon, which may or may not be a weapon I talked about recently. As for a high health target, if you see something like a heavy coming at you, just play around a corner or really any natural cover, and since heavy is a quite large and slow target, following up with a flare as they are charging towards you should be simple. And rather than doing that Pyro patented slow damage, you are smashing through that heavy's tankiness for almost half of his health every time you go for a flare, which if you are hitting your flares pretty much leaves heavies with very little escaping options without support from his teammates. Using flares in this way to do quick damage can also be used for something typically known to some as flare punching, which is when you emit a small amount of bursting flames from your primary weapon and then quickly follow through with it using your flare gun, which weirdly enough is so good you can actually deal crit burn damage to even other Pyros, despite them being fire resistant. This is because regardless of Pyro's base resistances, since flames from a flamethrower linger on for a decent amount of time, if a Pyro is standing in those lingering flames in that moment, it still counts to them being technically on fire. And being able to outplay another Pyro with this flare punch combo is very satisfying. Which, speaking of which, using the flare gun in general is quite satisfying. A lot of the other classes have that rewarding factor that makes the class way more engaging, like hitting a really good headshot with Sniper or a trick stab with the Spy, but with Pyro hitting that flick shot flare or perfectly maneuvering an enemy into your sight line for that extra crit damage is one of the most satisfying things you can do in TF2. I mean, take a look at this clip. Usually a Pyro couldn't really take on these many classes at once, but with the flare gun, I can pretty much just stay at range and take full advantage of the extra crit damage to mow down these enemies. Yeah, Pyro does have his Airblast, which is sort of a rewarding factor, but as I mentioned earlier, for the most part, Pyros are kind of just guessing when to Airblast enemies' rockets, or at least I am, which feels a lot more RNG based than actually something satisfying.
What?
One thing to note though about the flare gun is with it being a huge accuracy based weapon, the flare gun, believe it or not, actually requires skill. With enough good practice, of course, hitting your flares will become easier, especially once you've pinned down the ability to use predictable movements to your advantage. Another way you can make enemies move predictably is with using Airblast, even though I was just talking smack about it a second ago. Airblasting, aside from using it as a funny little annoyance to your enemy, also can be used strategically to arc an enemy into moving through a specific pathing, since airborne enemies, unless they're a scout, have very limited mobility, making following your flamethrower with a flare a lot easier. Now, of course, with all of this said, the flare gun by itself as an unlock is amazing, but it comes to no surprise that the flare gun was built to be comboed with other weapons. And one of the best weapon combos I find along with this is the Degreaser, which is the weapon you've seen me use for the vast majority of this video. The Degreaser works very well with the quick weapon holstering and activating, making it so switching between your two quote-unquote primary weapons are much faster and easier. The fast weapon switches from the Degreaser also makes it a lot easier to do other really cool things like rocket surfing. So whatever you do, only combo these weapons in games. Do not combo these weapons together in crafting. Another great weapon to combo with the flare gun is the Power Jack, which is sort of just a fantastic all-rounded weapon for the Pyro, allowing him to quickly get behind natural cover or to catch up to slower classes who are trying to escape. Also, if you are like me and find yourself often missing your flare and being low on flamethrower ammo, the Power Jack also does heal on kill for some reason, which is nice. Even though a whole lot of this video is about surrounding hype towards specifically the flare gun and how it converts Pyro into a fun, skill-based sharpshooter, it really shows that despite the usual bias that some members of the TF2 community has to Pyro being boring and linear, this simply isn't the case. Sure, running around with your flamethrower aimlessly can be fun for some people, but where I at least found Pyro's charm was in his unlockable weapons. And the flare gun is just scratching at the surface. There are so many other Pyro weapons that have this level of complexity and fun to them, like the Dragon's Fury, which is a close-range, stronger version of the flare gun. The Detonator, if you want to be a bootleg explosive class, the Thermal Thruster, if the height from the Detonator wasn't enough for you, or just slapping people with the hot hand can be pretty enjoyable. Like, where are you going? Get over here, you owe me some money! Get over here, bro! Regardless of what preferences or biases you have, any of the classes in TF2 holds fun to be had. And with singular weapons that can improve a class so much, like the flare gun, I can safely say that this also includes the Pyro. Thank you very much for watching this video. I wanted to just quickly say thank you for all the recent support of my TF2 content, especially my most recent Eureka Effect video. A lot of you left some really kind words, which really just mean a lot to me, and I wanted to make a kind of similar video talking about another weapon and also talking about a very specific class. If there's any Pyro weapons that you think makes the class fun though, let me know in the comments below. Also, a huge shout out to ThiccBoiJohn, who's been helping me with a lot of the recent visuals in my videos. If you want to check him out, the link to both the JTA channel and his personal channel will be in the description below. But other than that, be sure to do all that funny YouTube stuff such as liking and subscribing, and I will see you all in the next silly little video I make. Bye-bye.